before my brain could even process the magnitude of what he was saying. The night behind me exploded in red and blue. I looked in the rearview mirror. 2 police cruisers were pulling silently to the curb behind my driveway. Their lights cut through the rain, painting the interior of my luxury car in alternating shades. My house, the sanctuary where I had raised my daughter Karen, suddenly looked sinister in the flashing lights. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a trap. And the architects of that trap were inside, waiting for the steel jaws to snap shut around me. Just 48 hours earlier, I still believed I was the respected matriarch of a loving family. Sunday dinner. The smell of roasting rosemary chicken and garlic filled the dining room. But that night, the air was thick with something else entirely. Karen, my 45-year-old daughter, sat across from me. Lately, when she looked at me, those eyes were flat, opaque surfaces, reflecting nothing. Beside her sat Greg, her husband, of 20 years. A man whose clammy handshakes I had never liked, though I had given him a high-level position for Karen's sake. At the far end of the table sat Toby, pushing his peas around his plate, refusing to make eye contact. That should have been my first warning signal. Toby and I were thick as thieves. His silence was a screaming alarm bell I chose to ignore. "Mom, we need to discuss the incident at the warehouse yesterday," Karen began. Her tone was carefully modulated. The soft voice one uses with a stubborn toddler. I paused, with my fork halfway to my mouth. What incident? I was at the downtown office all day, reviewing tariffs. Greg exchanged a look with Karen. It was one of those heavy glances, weighted with a silent understanding. He pulled out his tablet, his movements slick and rehearsed. "Evelyn," he said, sliding the device across the polished mahogany table toward me. "The floor manager sent us this security footage. He didn't want to disturb you with it, given your recent condition." I looked at the screen. It was grainy footage from the saffron processing floor. A woman who looked exactly like me was standing by the conveyor belts. In the video, the woman started shouting at a line worker, gesturing wildly. Then, she grabbed a handful of expensive saffron and threw them. She stomped on them before collapsing into a chair, sobbing. I stared in horror. The woman on the screen was me, but it wasn't me. I had no memory of this. None. "That's impossible," I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "I wasn't there. I don't remember that." "That's what we're worried about, Mom," Karen said, reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. "These episodes are happening more frequently. You're losing time. You're becoming aggressive. The staff is terrified of you." "What other episodes?" I demanded, pulling my hand away. I felt like an actress thrust onto a stage in the third act. "Last Tuesday," Greg said, ticking off points on his fingers. "You authorized a shipment of paprika to Antarctica. We barely stopped it in time. On Friday, you fired the head of logistics. Because you said his tie was sending you messages. Lies. All lies. I remembered Friday perfectly. I had lunch with my accountant. We discussed tax shelters. The head of logistics was there. We joked about his awful Christmas tie. But as I looked at their faces, Karen's performance of deep concern, Greg's smug sorrow, a doubt began to burrow into my mind. Could it be true? I was 68. My mother had started showing signs of decline at this age. Was my mind the sharp instrument that conquered trade markets beginning to dull without me realizing it? We've spoken to Dr. Albright, Karen continued, pressing her advantage as she saw my resolve waver. Dr. Albright, our physician for 30 years. A man I trusted implicitly. And what did he say? I asked, my voice trembling. He's very concerned, Evelyn, Greg said. Given the rapid onset of these symptoms, he believes it requires immediate intervention. The room felt suddenly too small. The scent of rosemary turned acrid in my nostrils. The portraits on the walls seemed to look down on me with pity. What are you suggesting? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach like lead. Karen took a deep breath, as if pained by what she had to say. We think it's time you step down as CEO, Mom. Just temporarily. Until we get your health stabilized. And, Greg added, too quickly. We found a wonderful facility called Azure Horizons. It's a wellness retreat for cognitive restoration. You'd be safe there. Cared for. While Karen and I handle the burden of the company. There it was. The end game. They didn't just want me out of the chair. They wanted me out of the house, packed off to some gilded cage. While they took the keys to the kingdom I had built. I looked at Toby. He was gripping his fork so tightly, his knuckles were white. He looked sick. I need time to think, I stammered, pushing my chair back. The scraping sound against the hardwood was horribly loud. Of course, Mom, Karen said, soothingly. But we don't have much time. Dr. Albright thinks these episodes could become dangerous. I fled to my bedroom, my sanctuary. But even that felt violated. Over the past weeks, I had been feeling strange. Groggy in the mornings. As if I were wading through wet cement. I had been having vivid, terrifying nightmares. Just yesterday, I had woken up to find my favorite vase shattered. With no memory of breaking it. I had blamed stress. I had blamed grief. Lingering 3 years after my husband's death. But now, looking at the broken pieces of my life, I wondered if I was truly losing my mind. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the bottle of blood pressure pills on my nightstand. I took one every night before bed, just as Dr. Albright had prescribed. I swallowed one, with a glass of stale water, praying for clarity that wouldn't come. The next morning, Monday, was a fog. I woke up, feeling heavier than ever. My head was pounding. I went to the office. But Karen and Greg were already there, occupying my boardroom, making decisions without me. When I tried to intervene in a meeting, Greg gently guided me out, speaking in soft tones, giving me a look of profound pity. By Monday night, I was broken. I was ready to concede. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was a danger to the legacy I had built. I was sitting in my study, staring blankly at a contract Greg had drawn up, when a piece of paper slid under the door. I picked it up. It was a page torn from a notebook, folded tightly. Inside, in Toby's messy, hurried handwriting, were 3 words. "Don't take the pills." And wrapped inside the note was a small, black burner phone. I turned the phone on. There was one video file saved on it. I pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed through the crack of a slightly open door. It showed my kitchen late at night. Greg was standing at the island, humming to himself. On the counter was my bottle of blood pressure medication. And next to it was another, unlabeled brown jar, filled with powder. On the video, Greg expertly popped the caps off my pills. He dumped the real medicine into the sink and washed it down. Then, using a small funnel, he began refilling my capsules with the powder. Karen walked into the frame, holding a glass of wine. "Did you give her tonight's dose?" she asked, leaning against the counter. Greg chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Double strength. She should be barking at the moon in an hour. It's amazing how easy it is." A little psychotropic cocktail mixed with her tea. And the great Evelyn Reed turns into a paranoid mess. Karen swirled her wine. "It's taking too long, Greg. She's stubborn. Even drugged out of her mind, she fights it." "Don't worry, darling," Greg said, snapping the cap back onto my pill bottle. "After the incident we staged with the deepfake yesterday, we'll have her power of attorney by Wednesday. Then we can ship her off to Azure Horizons and finally sell this dusty company to a hedge fund." "Toby's getting suspicious," Karen said, a flicker of worry in her voice. "Toby is 16, Greg scoffed. "He's a child. Nobody listens to children, especially when their grandmother is clearly losing her marbles." The video ended. I sat in the dark study, the silence of the house pressing in on me, the smell of old paper and leather books, once comforting, now felt suffocating. I wasn't crazy. I was being poisoned. My own daughter was chemically dismantling my mind to steal my fortune. And her husband was the mixologist of my destruction. A cold, hard knot formed in the pit of my stomach. It replaced the fear It replaced the doubt. I wasn't a frail old woman losing her grip. I was Evelyn Reed. I had stared down hostile takeovers and navigated trade wars. I had survived the death of the love of my life. I had raised a child and built an empire. They thought I was weak because I loved them. They thought my affection was a blindfold. They could tighten until I suffocated. They were wrong. I walked into my bathroom and dumped the contents of my pill bottle down the toilet. I flushed it twice. Then I went downstairs to the kitchen. It was 2 in the morning. The house was silent as a tomb. I found the hidden camera Toby had mentioned. A tiny lens concealed in the smoke detector. I stood directly beneath it, looked up, and allowed a single tear to roll down. I made sure my hands trembled as I made a cup of tea. If they wanted a performance, I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I needed them confident. I needed them arrogant. I needed them to think the lioness was toothless and ready. Because the next night was when they planned to spring the final trap. They were bringing a notary to the house to sign the papers. I had 24 hours to turn their trap into my battlefield. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the rain start to fall, plotting. The grief over Karen's betrayal was a tidal wave I held back. There would be time for heartbreak later. Now was the time for war. The next morning, Tuesday, I put on my best show. I stumbled down to breakfast, without makeup, my hair disheveled. I let my hands shake so badly, I spilled coffee all over. I stared blankly at the wall when they spoke to me. I drooled slightly out of the corner of my mouth. "Oh, Mom," Karen sighed, wiping up the spilled coffee with theatrical patience. "Look at you. You're getting worse so fast." Greg patted my shoulder, his touch making my skin crawl. "Don't worry, Evelyn. Tonight we'll get everything signed. And tomorrow you'll be on your way to Azure Horizons. They'll take good care of you." I nodded, weakly, letting my head loll to the side. "Yes," I slurred. Tired, so tired. Just want it to stop. Greg exchanged a look of predatory triumph with Karen. They thought I was beaten. They thought the drugs had finally hollowed me out completely. I spent the rest of the day in my room, supposedly resting. In reality, I was using Toby's phone to make calls. The first was to Arthur Pendleton, my lawyer, for 40 years. When I told him what was happening, his outraged sputtering was loud enough to hear without the speaker. "Evelyn, this is monstrous. Criminal conspiracy, assault, fraud. We need the police." "Not yet, Arthur," I whispered, watching my bedroom door. "If we call them now, it's my word against theirs. They have doctored videos. They have Dr. Albright, who they've either bribed or tricked. They'll say I'm hallucinating, the poison plot. I need undeniable proof. I need them to confess. How? I told him my plan. It was risky. It required me to put myself in the line of fire. I need you to find someone, I instructed him. A private investigator. Former police, preferably. Someone who looks like a notary public. Arthur understood immediately. I know just the man. Frank Delacroix. He's expensive, but he's the best. He can have your dining room wired by 6. Good. Tell him to be here at 7 sharp. Karen told me the notary is arriving at 7:30. My second interaction was with Toby via text. Are you sure you want to do this, honey? It's going to get ugly. They drugged you, Grandma. They're stealing everything Grandpa built. I'm in. What do I do? Tonight at dinner. You have to play your part. You have to act sullen and defeated. Don't look at me. Don't give anything away. Got it. Stay safe. Love you. I put down the phone, my heart aching for the boy who was being forced to grow up too fast tonight. By 6, Arthur had sneaked Frank into the house through the servants' entrance while they were dressing. Frank was a bear of a man with intelligent eyes. He moved with stealth, planting cameras in the chandelier and microphones beneath the table rim in under 20 minutes. He handed me a small lapel pin. Wear this on your blouse. High-def audio recorder. Just in case. I pinned it to the collar of the gray dress I had chosen. It was somber, almost funeral-like. Fitting for the evening ahead. I'll be outside in the van, monitoring everything live, Frank whispered. The second you give the signal, we move in. At 7, I went downstairs. Karen had set the table with my best china. The platinum-rimmed set we only used for Christmas. The irony was thick enough to choke on. A celebratory meal for my own execution. The smell of slow-cooked lamb filled the air. Karen was in the kitchen, humming as she stirred a sauce. Greg was at the bar, mixing martinis. Right on time, Evelyn, Greg said, handing me a glass of sparkling water with a lime. Feeling any better? I took the glass with a trembling hand. Careful to spill a little. A little foggy still, Greg. Everything feels distant. That's normal, Mom, Karen called. Just relax. Tonight is about taking the pressure off you. I sat in my usual chair. Toby came down, a moment later, slouching into his seat. He smelled of teenage angst and body spray. He didn't look at me, just stared at his plate. Perfect. The doorbell rang at 7:30, precisely. That must be Mr. Henderson, the notary, Greg said, checking his watch. I'll get it. He returned with a short, balding man carrying a briefcase. Evelyn, Karen, this is Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, who was, actually, an undercover detective. Named Detective Alvarez, that Frank had arranged, nodded politely. Good evening. I understand, we have some urgent documents to notarize. Yes, my mother is eager to get this settled. So she can rest, Karen said, placing a platter of lamb on the table. We began to eat. The tension was palpable, at least, to me and Toby. Karen and Greg were practically vibrating with nervous energy. Their eyes were constantly darting towards the briefcase. I picked at my food, letting my fork clatter against the plate, maintaining the charade of declining motor skills. So, Evelyn, Greg said, midway through the meal, pouring himself another large glass of Cabernet. Are you clear on what you're signing tonight? It's a durable power of attorney. It gives Karen and me full control over your assets, the company, and your medical decisions. It's a big step. He was saying it for the notary's benefit, making sure it looked like informed consent. I looked up, slowly, letting my eyes drift unfocused. I think so, Greg. You said it would help me. You said I made a mess at the factory. Karen reached over and squeezed my hand hard. You did, Mom. It was awful. But don't worry, we'll fix it. We just need you to sign. She pulled a thick stack of documents from her bag. She placed them on the table, next to my plate. Mr. Henderson, Karen said, if you're ready. The detective wiped his mouth with a napkin. Of course. Mrs. Reed, these are standard documents. If you could, just sign here, and initialize, here. He pointed to the lines. My hands were shaking violently now. Not entirely an act. The reality of what they were doing was overwhelming. I picked up the pen. I hesitated. I let the tip hover over the paper. Mom, just sign it, Karen hissed, her facade of patience cracking. Do you want to end up in a facility? Azure Horizons is expensive. We need control of the accounts to pay for it. She's stalling, Greg muttered, downing the rest of his wine. He leaned in, close to me, his breath hot and vinegary. Sign the damn papers, Evelyn. You're finished. The company is ours now. You're just a confused old relic who needs to be put on a shelf. He was getting cocky. The alcohol and the proximity of his victory were making him sloppy. But Greg, I murmured, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. What about the special tea? The one you make me every night? Greg froze. Karen dropped her fork. What tea, Mom? You're confused, Karen said, quickly, glancing at the notary. But Greg, arrogant Greg, couldn't resist. He smiled, a cruel, thin smile. Oh, she remembers the tea. That's the best part, isn't it, Evelyn? My little, special blend. It's amazing what a few crushed up psychedelics can do to an aging brain. Made you crazy as a loon, didn't it? He laughed. He actually laughed. It was so easy. You trusted us completely. It was pathetic, really. I looked at Toby. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. I stopped shaking. I sat up, straight, in my chair. My spine stiffening with the steel that built an empire. I set the pen down. I did it with a deliberate, sharp click that echoed. I turned my gaze to Greg. My eyes were clear, sharp, and colder than winter. You know, Greg, I said. My voice steady and powerful, shedding the slur like skin. The thing about saffron is that it's incredibly potent. A little goes a long way. Greg stared at me, his smile faltering. What? And the thing about poisons, I continued. Locking eyes with my daughter, who had gone deathly pale, is that you have to be very careful who you serve them to. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the orange prescription bottle. Greg had filled it with the powder. I set it on the table between us. I believe this belongs to you. Karen gasped, horrified. Where did you get that? Toby, I said, simply. Greg stood up, his chair scraping violently back. You little brat, he snarled at my grandson. Sit down, Greg, I commanded. In the voice I used to fire executives. You think this proves anything? Greg sneered. Though sweat was starting to bead on his forehead. It's just a bottle. You're senile. No one will believe you over us and Albright. I smiled. A real smile, this time. Oh, I think they will. Especially when they hear the recording of you admitting to drugging me just now. I tapped the lapel pin on my dress. Greg's face turned a color. A mix of gray and sickly green. And I added, looking toward the notary, I believe Mr. Henderson has heard enough. Detective Alvarez stood up, pulling a badge from his pocket. Greg Miller, Karen Reed. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, administering a noxious substance, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. The front door burst open. Uniformed officers poured into the hallway, led by Frank and a furious Arthur Pendleton. I watched as my daughter was handcuffed. In the dining room where we had shared countless dinners. She was crying, now real tears of terror, begging me to tell them it was a mistake. Mom, please. He made me do it. I didn't want to, she sobbed. I looked at her, feeling a profound, aching sadness. You made your choice, Karen. You chose greed over your own mother. Greg didn't say anything. He just glared at me with pure hatred as they dragged him out the door. When the house was finally quiet again, the flashing lights gone, Toby came over and sat next to me. He put his head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him tight. We sat there for a long time, in the ruins of our dinner. "Are you okay, Grandma?" he asked, quietly. I looked around the empty room. I had lost my daughter. I had lost the illusion of a happy family. The road ahead would be messy. Trials, scandals, and untangling Greg's fraud. But as I looked at my grandson, the boy who had saved my life, I felt a flicker of warmth. I will be, Toby. We both will. We have a lot of work to do.